Again, the energy crisis continues to dominate political debate today. So let me just give you a little reminder. We live in an energy-rich country. Of the 195 countries in the world, we are ranked #1 for uranium reserves, #3 for coal, and top 10 for gas production. That's why we've traditionally been a cheap energy nation, a quality that's underpinned our post-war development. The only things that have changed the equation are our decisions. Governments, state and federal, Liberal and Labor, have decided to turn away from coal especially, but also reject numerous gas projects while shunning the use of uranium and turning instead to massive investments and subsidies for wind and solar, which are, of course, intermittent, unreliable. The International Energy Agency says that Australia has abundant energy resources and is a leading exporter of coal, uranium and liquefied natural gas. Yet, despite its wealth of resources, energy security concerns are on the rise. You can say that again, they are certainly on the rise. That was written last year. Now the security concerns have turned into a full-blown energy crisis, with the nation's energy ministers meeting last night to thrash out solutions. And after that meeting, the Federal Energy Minister, Climate and Energy Minister Chris Bowen, couldn't even bring himself to say the word coal. Certainly not a word in support, but neither, of course, a word to denounce it, given that it still supplies most of our power.
Do you support coal being included in the funding?
Well, look, what I support is a couple of things. I support supporting new technologies, so particularly storage technologies and renewables. But of course, it's designed to improve the capacity in the system. Now, I also believe it should be expert-led in terms of its design.
But do you support coal being?
I support the next draft being issued. And ministers coming back to consider it as a matter of some urgency.
So you haven't taken a position yet on coal?
I think the principles I've outlined are pretty clear that it should support new technologies.
Go on, Minister. You can say it. You don't have to take a lump of coal into Parliament, but it doesn't hurt to remind the country that coal still produces more than half of the nation's electricity, with gas providing another 20% or so. We shouldn't be pretending that despite 40, 50 or $60 billion of subsidies and investments, solar and wind each provide just under 10%. And not necessarily when we need it, of course. We need it now, for instance. And as I showed you yesterday, even the Green Liberal Treasurer of New South Wales suddenly wants to see more coal being burned.
However, what we can do is get our coal-fired power stations back online so that they're providing the bulk of the electricity at this time. We want renewables and coal at the moment providing electricity, not gas. Otherwise, that will continue to drive prices up right across the nation.
Yeah, that scarf might have put the mockers on the blues too, but that is the politics of climate change. That is the idiocy of our energy policies, and that's why I've been calling them out for more than a decade now. Our politicians have deliberately implemented policies aimed at sending coal-fired generators to the wall, driving them out of the system. And now that they've done that, they've shut down coal-fired generators in South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. Well, now those same politicians find that the national electricity grid has a drastic shortage, a shortage of dispatchable power that used to be supplied by coal. You couldn't make this stuff up. Here's Chris Bowen this morning.
A lot of people have called this a gas crisis, and I understand why people might say this, but actually this has been more a coal crisis. It's been more driven by our coal-fired power stations, which are getting very old, having outages. We've had floods in coal mines. That's really what's driven this crisis.
How about that, hey? The coal generators that we're trying to drive to the wall, they're the ones letting us down. And we don't have enough gas generation to back them up, when only last year Federal Labor and the New South Wales Liberals were poo-pooing the idea of a new gas-fired generator for the Hunter Valley. Renewables don't cut the mustard, of course, because they're not always there. You can't store enough electricity. So 15 years after Labor ratified Kyoto and promised a carbon price, more than a decade after they imposed a carbon tax that was later repealed by the coalition, and after almost a decade in opposition formulating energy plans, including getting to 82% renewable energy, Bowen today revealed that he doesn't have a plan, and he's asked the experts to give him one.
I could write the capacity mechanism, but the Energy Security Board are the right people to do it with the skills that they have, the consultation they've had. They've got writing instructions from ministers about what we want it to achieve, a principles-based approach, if you like, and how they think that's best reflected, they'll put out for consultation shortly.
Stay tuned, eh? We'll get a short-term plan in the next week or so. It might have been a good idea if Labor and the Coalition before them actually worried more about keeping the lights on than they did about making largely ineffective global climate gestures. Now, as you saw here on Tuesday, when it comes to permanent solutions for the medium to long term, the Coalition has finally decided to have a decent go at considering nuclear options.
It's a conversation we have to have, and if we truly want to get real about reducing emissions but having affordable and reliable energy, we cannot afford to have that debate without nuclear on the table.
But have a listen to the emotive, knee-jerk response today from the government.
Nuclear is the most expensive form of energy. We have a cost of living crisis, energy prices going through the roof, and what's their big bright idea? They say, let's have the most expensive form of energy we can possibly think of. Let's come up with the most expensive form of energy and let's put that in the system because that's going to make power prices cheaper. They want that debate? They really want to argue that? Bring it on. It's just a complete joke.
Well, that response is in fact a complete joke. If you want reliable, emissions-free energy and you keep up with the debate around the world, you know nuclear must be considered. Where does Chris Bowen think Australia's uranium exports go? They don't go into weapons, that's for sure. They provide reliable, affordable electricity in places like France, the US, Japan, Taiwan, India. A recent Royal Commission conducted by a Labor government in South Australia found the only reason nuclear energy was uneconomic at the moment was because of the national electricity market rules. Rules that favour renewables, of course, rules that have helped deliver this crisis. And you could change those rules, of course, with the stroke of a pen. There are distinct cost advantages for nuclear too. For starters, the plants last at least 60 years, perhaps 100, compared to 15 or 20 years for solar panels or wind turbines. So you can discount their cost by a factor of 3 or more over time. And they can be placed exactly where existing generators are sited so that you don't have to spend tens of billions more on new transmission lines. Bowen's scoffing at nuclear flies in the face of what's happening in the rest of the world, as evidenced by this CNBC report earlier this week.
Another common argument against nuclear power is that we already have other renewables to help us decarbonize.
Nuclear is a baseload power source. That means it runs all the time. For renewables to be used all the time, you need to have huge build out of battery technology. Right now, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, the technological and economic hurdles are really with renewables at the moment. How to store their energy efficiently. Don't we know that here in Australia? And while France, China and the UK are building vast nuclear power plants at the moment, elsewhere the focus is on smaller modular reactors and new streamlined technology.
Today, the industry is working on another crop of nuclear power reactors known as advanced reactors.
Advanced reactors will have very few refueling cycles. It's going to have extremely improved economics, and the safety pedigree has to be extremely high to the point where there are accident scenarios that are not even possible.
Compared to conventional light water reactors, advanced nuclear reactors are designed to be simpler and may use different fuel types and coolants in order to improve operational performance and safety.
It's a fascinating area, isn't it? Nuclear is the obvious replacement for coal-fired baseload power long term. There'll still be plenty of room, of course, for renewables and gas too. Gas for peaking and firming supplies. But across the globe, if we want to cut emissions, increasingly experts are turning to nuclear.
There are a lot of folks who are skeptical of our ability to move forward and to demonstrate in a manner that's timely relative to climate change, but history counsels us to be more hopeful. hopeful because we have done this before, and we now have an enormous commitment from the federal government as well as the private sector to go ahead and do this again, to do it differently and to do it better, but to do it with urgency that our situation demands.
Yeah, some good viewing there about up-to-date nuclear science for the Federal Climate and Energy Minister. I would urge Chris Bowen to follow the science. If you want secure energy, Minister, follow the science.